Before confusion had a name, before the tongues of men were scattered across the earth, there was unity, a unity built not on faith but on pride. They gathered in the plains of Shinar, their voices speaking one language, their hearts burning with one ambition. Let us build a tower that reaches the heavens. It was not just a tower. It was humanity's declaration of independence from God himself. Brick by brick, day after day, they rose higher, a people who believed they could touch eternity with their own hands. But have you ever wondered, how did it actually happen? Who were the builders? What was life like for the men who spent their days shaping the very monument that would bring down heaven's judgment? Today, we go back to the beginning, to the dust, the sweat, the fire, and the sound of hammers echoing to the valley of Shinar. This is the untold story of the Tower of Babel, not from the view of kings or rulers, but through the eyes of the builders themselves. The sun rose early in Shinar. The air shimmered with heat, and the sound of clay being mixed filled the morning. Thousands of workers, men, women, even children, gathered around pits of mud and fire. They molded bricks, burned them until they turned the color of blood, and stacked them high under the orders of a man named Nimrod, a ruler whose ambition knew no limit. They didn't know it then, but every brick they lifted carried not only weight, it carried destiny. Main body, the builders of Babel. The plains of Shinar stretched endlessly beneath a burning sun. The air shimmered like molten glass, and the rhythm of labor filled the valley. The sound of water slapping against clay, the clang of bronze tools, the echo of shouted orders in one perfect, unified tongue. Everywhere you looked, there was motion, a sea of people bound by a single vision. Brick after brick, the tower rose. The dream of a man named Nimrod. At the heart of it all stood Nimrod, a hunter, a warrior, and a man whose name carried both admiration and fear. They called him the Mighty One before the Lord. But behind those words lay something far deeper, defiance. He had gathered the tribes of the earth after the great flood, uniting them under one banner. His banner. He promised them protection from another judgment, from another deluge that might one day come from the heavens. And he told them, "Let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven." But in Nimrod's voice, there was more than hope, there was challenge. He was not only reaching up to heaven, he was reaching against it. Still, to the people, he was a savior. He gave them order. He gave them purpose. He gave them pride. And pride is a powerful mortar. It binds even stronger than clay. The builder's world. For the builders, life was simple, yet relentless. They rose before dawn. Their feet sank into mud still damp from the night's dew. They mixed straw with river clay, shaped the mixture into heavy molds, and carried in the great kilns that roared like thunder. Smoke poured into the sky, darkening the sun. The air smelled of fire and sweat. Each man knew his task. The clay workers, the transporters, the scaffold climbers. Thousands moved as one body, one heartbeat, one language. And at the end of each day, when the sun sank behind the horizon, they would look at what they had built, and it seemed to scrape the very belly of the clouds. They laughed, they cheered, and in their laughter, pride whispered softly, "We are unstoppable." The city beneath the tower. As the tower rose, so did the city around it. Wide avenues of mud brick homes, markets, and temples. Merchants traded metals and spices. Children played in the dust, while their fathers returned from the scaffolds. Everywhere, the same tongue was spoken, a perfect unity of sound and meaning. There were no misunderstandings, no divisions, and that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all, because when humanity agrees on rebellion, its power becomes terrifying. The spirit of pride. The workers began to carve images of the stars and the sun upon their bricks. They sang songs not to God of heaven, but to the heavens themselves. Some whispered that the tower was not merely for protection. It was to become a gate, a bridge to the divine. One young builder, his hands blistered and raw, asked his foreman one evening, "Will we truly reach heaven?" The foreman smiled. "Heaven will come down to us." Those words spread like wildfire through the camps. And from that moment, the tower was no longer just stone and clay. It became a promise. That man could replace God, a silent watcher. But heaven was watching. From above the clouds, The Lord looked upon the plain of Shinar and saw the tower rising higher each day. He heard their chants, their laughter, their pride, and though he could have destroyed it with a word, he waited, because judgment delayed is often mercy extended. He allowed their ambition to climb until even they could not see the danger in their own height. The higher they climbed, weeks turned into months. The tower's shadows stretched for miles, crossing rivers and fields. At the top, the wind howled so fiercely that men had to tie themselves with ropes to keep from falling. Still they climbed. Still they built. Each level was more intricate than the last. Walls coated with pitch and shining glaze, carvings of constellations and winged beasts. From the ground, the towers seemed to pierce the heavens themselves. But with every new height, something began to change among the workers. Their voices, once perfectly in sync, began to falter. One morning, a mason shouted for water. His helpers stared blankly, not understanding. At first, they laughed it off, a mistake, a slip of the tongue. But then another misheard. Then another. Orders became chaos. Shouts turned to arguments. By sunset, no one could understand the other. The day language died. Confusion spread like a storm. Teams abandoned their posts. The great furnaces burned unattended. Men who had worked side by side for years now quarreled, waving hands in frustration. Some began to wander away, thinking the gods had cursed them. Others accused their neighbors of madness. The unity that had once bound them, the pride that had raised them, collapsed in an instant, and from above the Lord spoke. Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Come, let us go down, and there confuse their speech. The judgment came not with fire, but with silence. No lightning, no quake, only the quiet breaking of understanding. And that silence destroyed the tower more completely than any storm. The scattering. Days later, the valley of Shinar lay in ruins. Half-built walls jutted like broken bones against the sky. The furnaces were cold, the scaffolds empty. Families gathered what little they could carry and began to walk north, south, east, and west. New tribes formed. New words were born. New cultures began. Each carrying a fragment of memory, a whisper of a time when humanity spoke as one. Some still told stories of the tower, how it reached for heaven, how it nearly touched eternity, and how it fell not by the hand of man, but by the confusion of his own tongue. The legacy of Babel. Generations passed. The Tower of Babel became a myth to some, a warning to others. But deep within human hearts, the echo remained. The desire to rise, to conquer, to unite. Even without God, we build new towers today, of technology, of pride, of power. And like the builders of Shinar, we believe they will make us eternal. But the lesson of Babel whispers still. When unity is driven by pride instead of purpose, it always leads confusion. And that was the day heaven came down not to destroy, but to divide, so that one day we might learn again to seek unity not in pride, but in grace. Ending, the echo of Babel. Centuries passed. The once proud plains of Shinar became nothing more than shifting dunes and scattered stones. The tower that had once pierced the clouds now lay buried beneath the dust of time. Only the wind remembers the sound of hammers striking clay, and the sky, the echo of human pride that once tried to reach it. But though the tower fell, its story never truly ended. Whispers through time. Every civilization that rose after carried a faint echo of Babel within it. Empires built monuments, pyramids, ziggurats, temples, all reaching upward, all seeking meaning beyond the stars. And though their languages differed, the same desire burned in every heart, to become more than human, to leave a mark that time itself could not erase. Yet each time mankind rose without humility, he fell. Every kingdom of pride turned to dust. Every monument without faith became a ruin. It seems the lesson of Babel is not only about language, it's about the limits of human ambition when it forgets its maker, the God who divided to unite. At first glance, God's act at Babel seems harsh, scattering families, confusing speech, dividing the earth. But look closer. In his wisdom, that confusion was not punishment alone, it was preservation. If mankind had remained united in rebellion, their corruption would consume them completely. By scattering them, God planted seeds of culture, language, and diversity, turning division into design and confusion into creativity. The very variety that colors our world today, its songs, stories, and tongues, began on that day in Shinar. He broke one language so that millions might bloom. He divided the earth so that redemption could one day gather it again. The return of unity. Thousands of years later, another story unfolds. In a small upper room in Jerusalem, a group of followers waited and prayed. And suddenly, a rushing wind filled the house, tongues of fire rested upon them, and they began to speak, in many languages, yet understood as one. It was Pentecost, the day God reversed the curse of Babel, not by human effort, but by his Spirit. At Babel, human pride divided. At Pentecost, divine grace united. And in that moment, heaven whispered again, "Unity is not found in human strength, but in my Spirit." The tower within us. The Tower of Babel is not just an ancient ruin buried in Mesopotamian sand. It lives in us, in every dream built on ego, in every empire self we try to raise without God. Each time we trust our own greatness more than his grace, we lay another brick on that invisible tower. But God, in his mercy, still reaches down, not to scatter us this time, but to remind us who we are. We were not made to climb above heaven. We were made to walk with its maker. Legacy of dust and grace. If you could stand in the plains of Shinar today and sift the sand through your fingers, you might find fragments of those ancient bricks. Tiny pieces of humanity's first monument to itself. They are silent now, but their silence speaks louder than any monument ever built. It tells us that pride always collapses under its own weight, but faith endures because it is not built on dust, but on the rock that never falls. So, as the sun sets over forgotten tower, remember this. The same God who came down to scatter men's words also came down in flesh, to speak one word that all humanity can understand, love. And that word still stands higher than any tower man will ever build.